And I made a presentation both personally and on behalf of the South African Gun Owners Association to Parliament in 2000. Concerning the structure and the content of the Act. From 2000 to 2004, I was part of the civilian component that helped draft the regulations to support the Act. Where I worked closely with the South African Police Services, legal services. From when the Act was promulgated in July of 2004, I've been involved in numerous processes concerning the Act. Most recently in May of 2023. My apologies. My apologies, Your Worship.
Okay, I'm with you from since the Act was promulgated in 2004. You were involved with
numerous processes, both judicial and parliamentary. The most recent of which was that I made a presentation to Parliament in May of last year to the Portfolio Committee on Police on behalf of the South African Arms and Ammunition Dealers Association, where the Minister, Deputy Minister, National Commissioner and various other senior police officers were present. I did that at the request of the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee. I was also a panelist at the Firearm Summit held in 2015 in Parliament by the Portfolio Committee on Police. And I most recently appeared with counsel in the Constitutional Court in 2022 in the matter of Fidelity versus the National Commissioner, the Minister and others. Concerning an interpretation of the Firearms Control Act. I broadly speaking represent a large number of different components of the firearm industry in my capacity as an attorney.
Would it be correct to say that you represent the security industry?
Yes.
We are concerned in this particular matter with tactical security services situated in the Blood Reserve. Are you aware of this company?
I am.
Have you had dealings with this company?
Part of my practice involves the obtaining of firearm licenses for security service providers. And in that capacity, I have made applications, prepared applications on behalf of tactical security services.
Would you say that you are...
Sorry, I couldn't make this. What's known to you and him is new for me. Just a second, I'm nearly... I have prepared... Sorry, then?
Firearm license applications.
on behalf of Tactical.
Correct.
If you could just, in broad outline before we deal with the specific matter, explain to the court how a security company would go about obtaining firearms for their security guards and the procedures that are used. If it is that simple.
Once a company is registered with the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority, CIRA, it is automatically accredited to own firearms. That company must nominate to the police a person who is responsible for making the applications, for the firearm license applications.
If we could just hold there. I had a document which unfortunately I sent off to get photocopy. But we can simply refer to the evidence of a Mr. Stander who has testified for the state from CIRA, who has indicated in his testimony, as well as the evidence of Lieutenant Colonel Janssen, that the person appointed or the responsible person for tactical security services was Mr. Clement Nduli.
I checked my records personally, and Mr. Ndululi was the responsible person according to the documentation that I prepared in 2018, and he was also the member of the closed corporation in 2018.
Tactical Security Services was a closed corporation.
Correct.
You can use it loosely as saying it was a company, but that's not 100% correct. Not.
Yes.
Mr. Nduli, Clement Nduli, he was, I suppose, the majority holder, if we call it that, of the closed corporation.
I don't know what his membership was, but he signed the application in his capacity as the member.
Okay. Now, let's follow the procedure that would now happen. You say that once a company like this or a closed corporation is registered with CIRA, it automatically becomes entitled to acquire firearms. Is that correct?
The word is accredited, yes.
Accredited. Okay. We have heard the evidence of Mr. Stander that tactical security was in fact accredited. And I'm sure you picked that up during your application for firearms on their behalf.
They had to be because they were granted firearm licenses.
All right.
They were?
They were granted, their licenses were approved. So they had to be compliant with that accreditation.
We've also heard the evidence of Lieutenant Colonel Janssen about an inspection done at Tactical Security, about the books that were kept and all the registers that are required to be kept by a company, or let's keep using the word company, like that. You are aware of that?
I'm not aware of the specific inspection, but police regularly inspect the books.
Now, I am the new security guard, and tactical security now wants to arm me because I'm going to be guarding an ATM. I want you to tell us the steps that need to be taken and the permissions, etc., and who is responsible for the firearm that I'm eventually got now in my possession.
The individual security officer has to be registered with CIRA, the regulator. They must have a competency certificate to possess a firearm.
Yes.
They must have completed additional training known as the business purposes training. In order that a firearm be given to that security officer, he must be in the employ or service of the license holder. The responsible person or someone delegated by the responsible person signs the firearm over to the security officer by way of an entry, a written entry, into a daily working firearm register. The security officer co-signs that they received the firearm. And then the security officer is issued a permit by the responsible person or someone delegated by the responsible person, which is a temporary license in effect, to possess that firearm on the conditions, according to the conditions stated on the permit.
I'll show you a document dated the 13th of March 2018 from the South African Police.
I noted.
Can you just repeat the March 2018? But was there a date?
Dated 13/3/2018. Unfortunately, I've asked for it back because we were on our way to make copies of it.
Do you want to go make copies
I will
of it?
immediately to the record. I think that's the easiest.
So I can write as fast as you read.
No, doesn't matter. I can
Not a problem.
I'll read the first few lines because that's what is of relevance here. It says the responsible, this is a warrant officer, A.M. Small from Brighton Beach, designated firearms officer. I will also show my learned friend the document. It says the responsible person for the safe handling and proper handling of firearms is Mr. T.C. Mdluli with ID number 760321 5498084, who is in possession possession of a relevant and valid competency certificate to handle and use all categories of firearms in possession of the above security company. You get this?
I have.
Now this coincides with the evidence, or corroborates the evidence of Lieutenant Colonel Janssen, who himself testified that Julius was the responsible person for firearm compliance and tactical security. Now,
If I may just put that slightly differently, Your Worship, if that were not correct, tactical security would not have been granted the firearm licenses in 2018.
why we are going through this exercise is because of the provisions of Section 120.10a of the Firearms Control Act, which is count 6 in this matter. And this section, the charge against accused number 2, and I'll read it to you. It says that on about the 28th of July 2018, at near the Caesar Ducasse Stadium in Mdantsane, the accused had unlawfully supplied or in any other manner give possession of a firearm and or ammunition to wit a .223 Narinka rifle and or a firearm the make of unknown to the state and a .223 Remington bullet to Julius Malema, the accused number 1. Now, what is important here is this section. Did unlawfully supply or in any other manner give possession of a firearm. Now, if I could just, before you reply to this, tell you that in a request for further particulars, the state was asked in what manner it alleged that the accused handed a firearm to Julius Malema. And the answer was, I will read it to you. Sorry, I need to find the right place.
Okay.
Okay, got it. The state's reply was, the cartridge found on the site after the event of the 28th of July 2018 was fired from the rifle with serial number SPA 249. The state alleges that the rifle was handed to Mr. Malema by accused number 2. You understand? That is what the further particulars say. When I last looked at the law, the state is bound by that answer. But in any event, I want you to comment on the provisions of Section 120 of the Firearms Control Act of if there is no evidence that he physically handed the firearm to him, this phrase in any other manner gives possession of a firearm.
So,
and how far back are we going? Are we going back to the manufacturer in Narinka?
Your Worship, first of all, I think it's subsection 10, bracket small a.
Yes.
Yes. Firstly, there is no definition in the Act of supply or possess. I've just checked that as you were asking the question. To give an absurd example, if I may, and speaking from experience, if one had to take a large security company that has many thousands of firearms, and there are quite a number of such security companies, to use this section, well, I have never seen this section used in my experience over 20 years to charge the owner or even the responsible person with such an offence. What almost invariably in my experience would happen is that the point of contact between the police and the license holder would be the responsible person. One of the primary functions of the responsible person is the keeping of up-to-date and accurate records. Excuse me. And there are registers specified in the regulations and how they are to be maintained. The police would then inspect those records and go through the chain of possession or use that those records specify. And they would then go to the person whomsoever those records specify as the last person who used or possessed that firearm. And then it is that person that is either asked to provide a statement or is charged with an alleged offence. And if I can just take it one step further, I've acted for many large security companies, and I cannot recall where the owner, the owner or director has been charged with this type of offence.
Let's use an absurd example. Fidelity, probably got hundreds, thousands of guards. Who knows how many firearms? Any one of those guards does something wrong, the owner will be charged because he, in some or other manner, gave possession of the firearm to the guard.
Well, that's the absurdity that I'm referring to.
In any event, the Firearms Control Act makes provision, does it not, for a person who has a license for the firearm to hand it to somebody who doesn't have a license?
Yes, there's a number of reasons for that. I think it's section 22. Yeah, section 22 of the Act. And, Your Worship, to give a simple example, if I may, the Act provides for this simply because for a person to obtain a competency certificate, they are obligated to handle and discharge a firearm. So you can't use and possess a firearm without a competency certificate. But in order, for example, to be trained, the training provider allows you to use their firearm under their supervision and control. That's the requirement of the Act. And there are many other examples where that would happen. For example, on a shooting range where someone wants to test fire a firearm, that is specifically provided for in the Act. It's called demonstration and display. Where someone wants to engage in a sports shooting competition, for example, many shooting associations provide firearms for that purpose, and they're used under the supervision and control of an official from that body. And a simple example, which is a fairly common example as well, is if someone wants to go hunting, they use somebody else's rifle in their presence and control when they go hunting. It's very common.
Now, if we apply what you regard as your testimony to this particular matter, and I must add from the outset that we will need comprehensive ballistic evidence to show that the firearm in question did not fire the cartridge case. So what I'm now putting to you is based on the premise that the state's evidence led so far is correct. You understand?
I do.
This particular firearm, according to all the records, was under and Lieutenant Colonel Janssen, who did a inspection, was in the possession of a person, I'll call him Mr. L.M., a security guard employed by Tactical Security Company Service. You understand that?
I do. It was signed out to him, in other words.
It was signed out to him. Mr. Nduli was the responsible person at the time. That is not only that document I showed you, but also the evidence of Lieutenant Colonel Janssen. Now, who would be the responsible person for this particular firearm?
Your Worship, we need to draw a distinction between responsible person as contemplated by the Act, which is a specific individual, and who is responsible for the firearm, which is different.
Okay.
So the person who is responsible for the firearm would be the person to whom it was signed out from the daily working register and who had the temporary authorization to possess that company firearm. That is the person that the police ordinarily, and in my experience almost invariably, would hold accountable for any misuse of that specific firearm. And I'd like to add as well, bearing in mind that I was involved in the genesis of the Act, that was always one of the principal purposes of what became Regulation 21 of the Firearms Control Act, which is intended to enable the police or a regulator to ascertain who had possession and use of a particular firearm at a particular time.
You said there were two scenarios.
Well, the responsible person being the one in the police records, and then the person who is responsible. I'm speaking about the person who is responsible, not the responsible person.
Do you think under these circumstances, if I may ask you this, if you don't want to answer it, say Mr. LM did something with a firearm, fired a shot at his girlfriend in anger, do you think Mr. Julius would be held responsible in law for that?
I think I've answered that. I've said that the starting point for an investigation would be to go to the responsible person. But then that the records that are required to be kept in terms of Regulation 21 and Regulation 22 show the chain of possession and custody, and ultimately the individual security officer would be held accountable.
That's the purpose of these regulations.
Absolutely. And I want to emphasize that, again, in my experience, where I have conducted many criminal trials, I've represented accused based upon an offence committed with a business firearm. It is the security officer who had possession that is charged. The only time a responsible person might be charged would be if there is improper record keeping in some way, and then that is covered by Section 122, I think it is, which deals with administrative fines. In other words, it's an administrative issue, not a criminal issue.
You have read the ruling in terms of the Section 174 application before this court, is that correct?
I have.
Of course, worship is very entitled to, it's a discretionary matter, to refuse a 174 so desire. But I want you to comment on this ruling by the court in terms of our Section 174, if you are able to. If you don't want to, just tell me.
Would you like to read me the part, please?
I'll read it to you. It says it comes, I'm reading from page 26 of your worship's ruling, from line 17. It says it comes down to the fact that count 4 and count 6 remain a statutory offence. It was confirmed in the evidence so far presented by the state that the firearm in question, being SPA 249/14, is indeed your firearm or the company's firearm, then inaudible, I should put it in that manner. The cartridge that was picked up at the scene or close to the stage or after the incident is linked with microscopic ballistic analysis to SPA 249/14. Much emphasis was placed on the fact that none of the videos or witnesses testified that they saw you, thinking about this two now, handing a firearm to Mr. Malema, but that is not the charge. The charge is, and I will read it for clarity, it is much wider. It is unlawful supply or in any other manner give possession of a firearm or ammunition. Being the Narinka firearm and a Remington bullet to accused number 1, so the actual not seeing or handing over is not a requirement in terms of count 6. It is supply or in other manner give possession.
With respect, Your Worship, first of all, the firearm could never have belonged to an individual for two reasons. The first is that the license holder is Tactical Security Services. And that is a separate legal entity to any other corporate or individual person. Secondly, it goes back again, and Your Worship, I say this with respect, to the absurdity of the interpretation of the Act, because it seems so literal and so strict that you could say that the manufacturer could be held liable for making and supplying the firearm to a wholesaler who sold it to a retailer who sold it to a company or an individual. That is not the purpose, in my opinion, or the intent of the legislation. And I have never seen such a charge. I said earlier, I've never seen such a charge other than in circumstances where there was some form of direct interaction between the parties.
If I may move on to what is termed a blank gun. Sorry, Your Worship, I just confused with the studies. I'll ask you this, is it correct that you were shown we were probably having difficulty, Your Worship, of bringing this into the court premises? We'll see if we can. We had that agreement, if Your Worship will recall, that if we wanted to bring any firearm in, we would notify everybody before the time.
I think the agreement was you'll clear it with all the relevant parties.
You were shown a firearm, is it correct? What is called a blank gun?
I've seen many blank guns. I haven't been shown specifically one for this matter.
Oh, sorry, I thought they'd shown.
No, I haven't.
I think I'm correct. These blank guns, are they required to be licensed?
I'm going to say a very simple no, Your Worship, because they are sold without licenses, and the National Prosecuting Authority and the police accept that such sale and possession is lawful.
You are aware from the National Director of Public Prosecution, I think Advocate
De Kock.
De Kock, he was the author thereof, in which he notifies the police that no prosecutions must take place for these firearms.
That's correct. I'm aware of it. If I can just add as well that it follows that the possession of the ammunition used in those blank guns is lawful as well.
Well, we have a ballistic expert that's going to testify about this particular gun. I would have liked to have shown it to you, but we will leave it at that if it becomes necessary during the cross-examination or the re-examination. I will ensure that I get permission to bring it in here because it's going to be obvious to everybody that one cannot distinguish between the real one and blank.
Your Worship, as I indicated, I've seen a number of blank firing objects and their ammunition. And although I'm not a ballistic expert, I own a large number of firearms. I'm an enthusiastic shooter and firearm collector, and I cannot distinguish between a blank firing object and a real firearm. They're in fact designed both in terms of appearance and their mechanical working abilities to be exactly the same as a real licensable firearm.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one further question my colleague has pointed out to me. Were you aware that Mr. Snyman was not a member of Tactical Security Services in 2018?
I've checked my records, and the member was Clement Nduli.
Thank you. Sorry, Your Worship, could I just request to excuse his call?
Yes.
Sorry, Your Worship, I forgot to apologize for the accused being late. They had in fact gone to a different court. The accused want me to apologize on their behalf.
Thank you. Advocate orders, cross-examination.
May I approach my sister?
Certainly.
Excuse my back. I have no questions for this witness.
Thank you. Advocate Caesar, cross-examination. You need a minute? Do you ready?
Yes, Your Worship, may I just request a brief adjournment? One, I want to make a copy of the document that was at Advocate Matthew's disposal for all the parties involved. Number two as well, I just want to also make a copy of the document they refer to about the NBA Advocate de Cox draft. I think
Draft.
in my possession. I'll just make copies for everybody.
Thank you.
So the
No objection.
adjournment will be half an hour, Your Worship.
Half an hour.
Or June.
It's up to you. I'm in my office, available